The idea which I have developed in this pamphlet is a very old one. It is the restoration of the Jewish state. The world resounds with outcries against the Jews, and those outcries have awakened the slumbering idea. I wish it to be clearly understood from the outset that no portion of my argument is based on a new discovery. I have discovered neither the historic condition of the Jews nor the means to improve it. In fact, every man will see for himself that the materials of the structure I am designing are not only in existence but actually already in hand. If therefore this attempt to solve the Jewish question is to be designated by a single word, let it be said to be the result of an inescapable conclusion rather than that of a flighty imagination. I must in the first place guard my scheme from being treated as utopian by superficial critics who might commit this error of judgment if I did not warn them. I should obviously have done nothing to be ashamed of if I had described a utopia on philanthropic lines, and I should also in all probability have obtained literary success more easily if I had set forth my plan in the irresponsible guise of a romantic tale. But this utopia is far less attractive than any of those portrayed by Sir Thomas More and his numerous forerunners and successors. And I believe that the situation of the Jews in many countries is grave enough to make such preliminary trifling superfluous. An interesting book, Freeland, by Dr. Theodor Herz, which appeared a few years ago, may serve to mark the distinction I draw between my conception and a utopia. His is the ingenious invention of a modern mind thoroughly schooled in the principles of political economy. It is as remote from actuality as the equatorial mountain on which his dream state lies. Freeland is a complicated piece of mechanism with numerous cogged wheels fitting into each other, but there is nothing to prove that they can be set in motion. Even supposing freelance societies were to come into existence, I should look at the whole thing as a joke. The present scheme, on the other hand, includes the employment of an existent propelling force. In consideration of my own inadequacy, I shall content myself with indicating the cogs and wheels of the machine to be constructed, and I shall rely on more skilled mechanicians than myself to put them together. Everything depends on our propelling force. And what is that force? The misery of the Jews. Who would venture to deny its existence? We shall discuss it fully in the chapter on the causes of anti-Semitism. Everybody is familiar with the phenomenon of steam power generated by boiling water, which lifts the kettle lid. Such tea kettle phenomena are the attempts of Zionist and kindred associations to check anti-Semitism. I believe that this power, if rightly employed, is powerful enough to propel a large engine and to move passengers and goods, the engine having whatever form men may choose to give it. I am absolutely convinced that I am right, though I doubt whether I shall live to see myself proved to be so. Those who are the first to inaugurate this movement will scarcely live to see its glorious close, but the inauguration of it is enough to give them a feeling of pride and the joy of spiritual freedom. I shall not be lavish in artistically elaborated descriptions of my project, for fear of incurring the suspicion of painting utopia. I anticipate, in any case, that thoughtless scoffers will caricature my sketch and thus try to weaken its effect. A Jew intelligent in other respects, to whom I explained my plan, was of the opinion that a utopia was a project whose future details were represented as already extant. This is a fallacy. Every Chancellor of the Exchequer calculates in his budget estimates with assumed figures, and not only with such as are based on the average returns of past years or on previous revenues in other states, but sometimes with figures for which there is no precedent whatsoever. As for example, in institutes, everybody who studies a budget knows that this is the case. But even if it were known that the estimates would not be rigidly adhered to, would such a financial draft be considered utopian? But I am expecting more of my readers. I ask the cultivated men who I am addressing to set many preconceived ideas entirely aside. I shall even go so far as to ask those Jews who have not most earnestly tried to solve the Jewish question to look upon their previous attempts as mistaken and futile. I must guard against a danger in setting forth my idea. If I describe future circumstances with too much caution, I shall appear to doubt their possibility. If, on the other hand, I announce their realization with too much assurance, I shall appear to be describing a chimera. I shall therefore clearly and emphatically state that I believe in the practical outcome of my scheme, through which professing to have discovered the shape it may ultimately take. The Jewish state is essential to the world. It will therefore be created. The plan would of course seem absurd if a single individual attempted to do it. But if worked by a number of Jews in cooperation, it would appear perfectly rational, and its accomplishment would present no difficulties worth mentioning. The idea depends only on the number of supporters. Perhaps our ambitious young men, to whom every road of progress is now closed, seeing in this Jewish state a bright prospect of freedom, happiness, and honours opening to them, will ensure the propagation of the idea. I feel that with the publication of this pamphlet, my task is done. I shall not again take up the pen unless the attacks of noteworthy antagonists drive me to do so, or it becomes necessary to meet unforeseen objections and to remove errors. Am I stating what is not yet the case? Am I before my time? Are the sufferings of the Jews not yet grave enough? We shall see. It depends on the Jews themselves whether this political pamphlet remains for the present a political romance. If the present generation is too dull to understand it rightly, a future, finer and a better generation to understand it. The Jews who wish for a state shall have it, and they will deserve to have it.